We're continuing our discussion about the biblical foundation of marriage. And so we're going all the way back to the book of Genesis. We're looking at God's blueprint for relationship. We're looking at God's design for marriage. Now, the principles that we've been discussing thus far and will continue to discuss in this video, if these principles are embraced, if they become part of your life, part of the marital relationship, you will have great success. What I have found is that when couples violate or distort these principles that are found in God's blueprint, trouble arises in the relationship. And so we're going to start back with our key verse from Genesis chapter 2. Genesis chapter 2 and verse 24. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. Here we find the principle of intimacy and safety. Adam, created by God, is given his helpmeet. He is given his completer. The two become one flesh, and they are completely naked now. They're exposed, they're vulnerable, and yet they are not ashamed. And so we learn key truths about this idea of intimacy. What is intimacy? The word intimacy comes from this idea, comes from this expression of knowing someone from the innermost. That's literally what the word means. What do you mean by that? If you truly know me, if my spouse, my wife knows me, she knows everything about me. She knows my past. She knows my shortcomings. She knows where every fault line is. If you truly know me and still love me, then we have intimacy. To be completely known and still love. That is the ultimate expression and completion of every relationship. That is God's design. Think about that. That is the way that God loves you. He knows everything about you. He knows your past. He knows your weaknesses. He knows every fault line in you as well, but still loves you. And so when we express that to our spouses, we develop this sense of safety that I can say anything. I can tell you anything. I can share anything. I have no need for secrets. I have no need for lies. I have no need to keep anything private because we are one flesh, completely exposed, completely vulnerable, but safe. I can also share with you this, that intimacy will only grow in an environment of safety. Intimacy is very fragile. It's like a tender plant, and it has to have the perfect environment to thrive and survive. And so, for couples to find true intimacy one with another, there must be safety. There must be love, there must be tenderness, there must be affection. And so intimacy begins to grow and can develop, or intimacy can be squashed. It can be rooted out. It can absolutely die. So when you think about intimacy, I want you to think more than just about the physical relationship of a man and a woman, though that is part of it, but you are a whole person. You are body, soul, and spirit. So that means, that carries this idea that to be united with somebody in marriage, to join in that covenant of three, your spouse, and God, you're entering into this realm of intimacy and knowledge of one another, and this bond that is physical, spiritual, and emotional. And to be close in that regard, to be close in that way, there must be this safety. They were exposed, they were vulnerable, they were naked yet not ashamed. How often shame comes into a relationship? How often guilt comes into a relationship? Or how often a sense of fear, a sense of not being safe, not being validated, not being fully accepted. When those things are in the relationship, intimacy dies and the relationship begins to get further and further apart. The man, the woman, they become distant. And you may live under the same roof. You may even experience a physical intimacy, but if you are separated spiritually and emotionally, everything else dies as well. So you feel disconnected, you feel unloved, you feel unwanted. Intimacy and intimacy issues are going to be something that come up in a marriage counseling session often. And so, where do you begin? You begin by going to the scripture, defining what intimacy is, where it's been violated, where it's been shut down, where it's not been allowed to grow and to flourish. And then you can take the couple through those practical thought talks, and you can go to the very heart of the matter. But this is where you would begin in that process. So God has given us this perfect blueprint for relationship. He's given us this perfect picture of how a man and a woman can come together, become one flesh with one another, to the point where they are vulnerable, completely exposed, and still safe. They were completely naked, yet not ashamed. And so we have true intimacy. It's a picture of how Christ loves us. It's the picture of how our relationship in Christ exists, that we're bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh. True intimacy is a sacred experience. So you might ask, if we have this great blueprint, this great plan and designed by God, all of these resources that God has given to us from the book of Genesis, why do marriages fail? Why do couples have so much trouble? Why do we go through these stressors in life, and some marriages work and some marriages just seem to crumble apart and fall apart into bits and pieces? Well, to answer that question and to give support and hope and pull from great resources, I'm going to pull from the John Gottman research. What Gottman has done in the Gottman Institute for years, they've studied couples from all walks of life. They have found that couples typically can be placed into two categories: the masters of relationship and the disasters of relationship. Both sets of couples have problems. They have life. They go through things, but the masters seem to handle it so much better. They interact better, they problem solve, they have closeness. The disasters of relationship seem to have the opposite of that. They don't cope, they don't have good problem solving, they separate, they do all of these things. And so we're going to take a look at the Gottman principles as a way to support your counseling efforts and support the resources that you have in helping couples understand what's going on and how to move from being a disaster in a relationship to a master in relationship. From the Gottman Institute, we learn about the four horsemen of the apocalypse. What John Gottman means by this is that the disasters of the relationships, they tend to exhibit these four interactive styles, these four behavioral characteristics. They display these types of attitudes toward their spouse. And if a person or a couple is engaging in this, more than likely the marriage will fail if it continues, unless something stops. So, what are the four horsemen of the apocalypse? Well, the first horseman is that of criticism. Now, criticism is much more than just a complaint or raising a concern. Criticism is a personal, demoralizing insult. It's not just that someone didn't do the dishes or failed to take out the trash. It becomes a personal insult at that point. And so it gets personal. The criticism is not healthy in a relationship. Will there be negative interactions in the life of every couple? Absolutely. According to the Gottman research, and this is interesting, that for every negative interaction, you must have at least five positive interactions to counterbalance that. And so you might think, well, what if we're just at 50-50? If it's one positive for every negative interaction, not good enough. For every negative interaction that you have to have five positive interactions, or the couple will go into what Gottman describes as negative sentiment override. That's where when you think about your partner, everything is negative. You ruminate over the whole history of troubles that you've had. You pull historically from arguments in the past, and you just have this constant rumination in your mind, and everything is colored in a negative way. How do you balance and counteract that? You employ positive sentiment override. You think about what you're grateful for in your partner. You think about what you're thankful for, and you think about their positive qualities. But the bottom line is this: if there is criticism that is of a deep, hurtful nature, that marriage is in trouble. What are other behaviors? What are the other horsemen? Well, the next one would be contempt. And contempt is a deep-seated, and I will say this, even a hatred for your partner. You can't stand not only something that they've done, but the very person themselves. It becomes contempt. And once you get to this point, it's hard to pull that back. And so you have criticism, contempt, you have defensiveness. And that is the partner that does not take ownership in what they bring to the table. They never apologize. They never become vulnerable. They never own their part in the relational equation. It's a horseman of the apocalypse. It is also the another behavior would be that of stonewalling, and that is shutting down, that is running away, that is not talking, that is pouting, that is going away, running off, walking away, not getting anything done. So, how is this turned around? What are the antidotes for these types of behavior? Well, it's for criticism, it's the soft startup. And what that might look like, instead of going right in for the complaint, the criticism, you might just gently pose a concern. You might say, I've been thinking about this for a while, and here's something that I'd really like to talk to you about, but the startup is soft. It's not abrupt. You see, when you look at the four horsemen, what we're not saying is that you should never have a complaint or a disagreement. You're going to have plenty of those. The idea is that the quality of the conversation must be civil. It must be cooperative. It must be collaborative. When you are one up talking one down to somebody, it's not going to go well. The other person will go into the other behaviors, the defensiveness, the stonewalling. So when you have criticism, a great antidote for that is the soft startup. When you have contempt, what you want to do is build a culture of appreciation. And so it's being thankful for your partner. It's identifying their traits and their positive qualities and expressing those. And when you're not together, even thinking about those to avoid the negative sentiment override. The defensiveness, basically, the best antidote for that is to accept responsibility. One of the great issues that I have found in relationships is that if a spouse has a difficult time accepting the influence of their partner, of their spouse, of their husband, of their wife, the relationship has a huge struggle point, has a huge vulnerability. What are you saying? I'm saying that healthy relationships, healthy couples reach a point where you're able to accept the influence of your partner. It's not always met with a defense. It's saying, you know, maybe you were right about that. Maybe I didn't see that. Maybe I misunderstood that. And so also this idea of stonewalling. How do you get beyond that? And really you've got to develop this point, this behavior of self-soothing. And what that may mean when you're flooded, when you're upset, when you're angry, instead of shutting down and walking away and being mad and pouting, you might need to take a healthy walk. You may need to go to the gym. You may need to do something to bring yourself back to a point where you can logically talk when you're not in the reactive fight or flight mode, but you can actually calm and talk and problem solve and work through to the point of solutions. But these are the behaviors to be concerned about. And in counseling, most of your couples are going to come in and they are going to present with at least one, if not all four, of the horsemen. And so you want to be able to identify this, and you want to be able to talk about the antidotes for this. The truth is this, that most couples, even couples that experience and report that they have high quality of relationship satisfaction, they still have problems to the point of about 69 to 70% of the problems seem to be perpetual, and about 29-30% of the problems seem to be, things that we can work through, things that we can resolve. But we have these perpetual problems that we just have to work with. The masters of relationship have those problems. They have those difficulties. But the interaction always is with honor and with respect, and it's with love. And so you can speak the truth in love, and you can interact one with another in kindness. But when those things are off the table and it's all about criticism and contempt and stonewalling and defensiveness, the marriage is in a lot of trouble. And so we learn this and so much more from the Gottman research. But this will help you and this will equip you to better talk with your couples, to help guide them through the point of resolve, to the point of resolve. I want to talk to you about healing and restoration in the relationship. Every relationship will experience difficulties. We will have moments where we agree and disagree, or maybe even agree to disagree. It is the nature of relationships that we will have difficulty, as Paul talked about it, trouble in the flesh. And so, with this being said, how do we get through this? What doesn't work, based upon the research and based upon, no doubt, your own good experience, is criticism, holding contempt against one another, being defensive, stonewalling, running away and pouting. Those things don't work. What does work is talking about it, getting through it, working through the problem, being vulnerable, completely exposed, but yet feeling safe to talk about anything. Stuffing these problems down will never help the relationship. As a matter of fact, stuffing the problems is a surefire way to destroy, kill, and suffocate intimacy. What we know is this: the most functional way to regulate difficult emotions in love relationships is to share them, is to communicate with each other, is to talk through it. And so sometimes that is best done with a third party, with a counselor. So if the relationship is like most relationships, your relationship, the relationship of folks that you'll be working with, they will experience this time of harmony, disharmony, and then reconnection. The reconnection is vital, and it's essential that there is much forgiveness and healing. Every relationship must experience this. The relationship that heals is the relationship that is so strong and so vibrant. And you'll be amazed what you're able to get through in life. The long-term relationship is a relationship that is committed one to another, and it is a relationship that must go through these difficulties. And to get through them successfully is the way that we maintain intimacy and closeness versus living with one another and being emotionally and intimately divorced under the same roof. So often I'll hear somebody say, well, we're just roommates now. What I have found is that roommates will soon feel like cellmates. And that's not the relationship that God has designed for you. And that's not the relationship that anybody wants. And so a couple may dissolve, break up, and go away, or they may live in misery. Neither of those are wonderful options. What does work and what can work is the beautiful act of restoration between a man and a woman, because again, the relationship of a man and a woman is that relationship that we have in Jesus Christ, and it's pictured in the relationship that is very human. I want you to think about the garden once again. When we go back to the garden, we see man and woman put together. They're completely one flesh, unashamed. All of that's beautiful, but you know the way this story plays out. You know that Adam will come one day and he will find that Eve has partaken of the fruit. Eve was deceived. Adam sees her. What's going to happen? You know the Genesis account of creation. The day that they would eat of that fruit, they would die, not physically, but spiritually. What would that mean? That they would be put out of the garden forever, out of paradise. And so here comes Adam. Eve is his completer. Eve is his love, and Eve loves Adam. But she is deceived now by the serpent, by the enemy. Now, I know that you've heard much teaching and preaching about this for many, many years. And I think to understand the gospel, the fall of man is essential, and we get that. And I want you to understand that. But I think there may be an additional layer to this story that's worth our consideration. Eve partakes of the fruit. Adam comes. He partakes of the fruit. They're both put out. Is it just that, well, Adam sees Eve, you've taken the fruit. I want to try that too. I think there's much more to it. And here's what I would suggest to you, and this comes out of deep theological truth and teaching for quite some years. But another way to look at this is when Adam came, he saw that Eve had taken the fruit. He knows what's going to happen. She is going to be put out of the garden and he will be alone forever. What happens though? He loves Eve. He doesn't want to be separated from her. He doesn't want to feel that pain. And so Adam willingly and knowingly partakes of the fruit. He dies and he is put out with his bride from paradise. In that sense, Adam is a picture and a type of Christ, in that he gave himself and he dies for his bride. He dies for his bride so that he would not be alone, that they would be put out together, redeemed by God the Father, restored outside of the garden, and there they would live. They would live forever. They would live their relationship out until the end of their days as one flesh. There was healing and restoration when this couple had gone through intense problems and intense violation of even God's principles. And so in this, we see that we have this beautiful picture of Christ, how he has loved the bride and he has given his life for you and I, that Christ willingly, we were born into this world as sinners, but Christ willingly became sin for you and I. Why? That he would always be with you, that you would be with him, that we would be one flesh together forever. And so you see this beautiful picture of Christ. Why are you talking about this? And why did I take a deep dive into theology just now? Because it's essential that we understand the blueprint and God's design for marriage and relationship. How is a man to love his wife? We are to love our wives as Christ loved the church. We give ourselves to the bride. And so in love, there is sacrifice, there is a giving of self, there is a yielding of will, there is taking on that role of complete Christ likeness. And so there's much in this picture of creation that God has given us. There's much within this blueprint. And so you have all of the elements of relationship played out, explained, illustrated in the relationship of Adam and Eve and the creation account of Genesis.